Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Carl Jung. This is Mysterium Coniunctionis. I'm still having trouble with the word, I will get it by the end. We will be reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you were unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link from my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Carl Jung's Mysterium Coniunctionis, with Chapter 1, The Opposites. Now we're going to have to break this into parts because it is 25 pages long, so we're going to do the first two parts of this, and then tomorrow will be the second part. 1. The Opposites. There are also a very lot of footnotes. I do have them pulled up to the side. We will be going through them as appropriate because we do want the full understanding of what's going on. The factors which come together in the coniuncto are conceived as opposites, either confronting one another in enmity or attracting one another in love. Footnote 1. Ripley says, the coniunctio is the uniting of separated qualities or an equalizing of principles. Ducium poratium axiomato philosophica. Theatrium chemicum 2. To begin, they form a dualism. For instance, the opposites are humidum, moist, secum, dry, frigidum, cold, calidum, warm, superiora, upper, higher, inferiora, lower, spiritus anima, spirit soul, corpus, body, colum, heaven, terra, earth, ignis, fire, aqua, water, bright, dark, agens, active, patiens, passive, volatile, gaseous, fixum, solid, pretiosum, precious, costly, also carum, dear, vile, cheap and common, bonum, good, malum, evil, manifestum, open, occultum, occult, also celatum, hidden, oriens, east, occidens, west, vivum, living, mortum, dead, masculus, masculine, poema, feminine, soul, luna. Okay, so one thing that we can notice about all of these things, right? These are spectrums. These are not, they are opposites, right? Opposites are the opposite ends of a spectrum. That's what opposites are. Love and wrath are opposite ends of the same spectrum. Chastity and lust are the opposite ends of the same spectrum. Greed and charity, opposite ends of the same spectrum. And so that's what we see here, right? Moist and dry, cold and warm, upper and lower. These are also relative terms, right? Moist is only relative to your understanding of it. Water is very moist, that is true. Dew is a little bit less, but it is still very wet. Right? It is a matter of relativity, what is moist and what is wet. The same with dry, right? Cold and warm are merely just relative to each other and your current understanding. So if something is more or contains less heat than you, we consider that to be cold. If it contains more heat than you, we consider it to be hot. But there is no clear defining line between these things. Now, there is between dry and wet, right? There is an absolute point at which it is wet and it was not before, right? That is a dividing line that is still exceedingly hard to draw. At what point does this pile of sand become a heap, right? What particular grain makes that designation? That's going to be exceedingly difficult to do. The best you can do is to realize that there is a relative difference. And the best you can do is to understand that a heap is bigger than a pile. Where the clear definition is, that's going to be difficult to ascertain. Understanding that size is a thing, that there is a differentiation by the accumulation, is much more important than the actual designation of when that separation occurs. And that is true for most of these, right? These are mostly relative terms. Bright and dark, relative. Now, earth and heaven, those are not necessarily going to be relative, right? Those are definitely some spectrums, but there is definitely a difference between that and this. Now, that is a relative difference by density, which is just our understanding of physics, right? If it is less than us, then it is considered a liquid, or it's considered a gas. If it is more dense than us, then it is a solid, but those are relative terms. Dihydrogen oxide is the same thing whether it is gas, whether it is liquid, or whether it is ice. It is still the same material. It's just the relative understanding of the heat levels that changes. The physicality of them are still the same. It is just less heat, less movement, more density. Same thing, different states of being. That is going to be most things, right? The only real difference between the earth underneath your feet and the air that you breathe is relative density. All of the same elements are contained. There is carbon free floating around you. There is oxygen and gold. There is aluminum and lead free floating in the air. What the quantities are can vary significantly, but they are contained in there. And so the only difference between the heavens and the earth is a relative one. That extends into space as well, right? The relative density is the difference. Now, all of these things are physically here in reality. They are composed from the Holy Spirit, which is the elements, right? The electromagnetics of them is the governing of the density. And so if it is hotter, they spread apart a little bit more. If it is cooler, they combine a little bit more. But again, it is still relative. There is only the application of heat. There is no application of cold, right? You don't make something colder. You remove heat from it. That is the mechanics by which thermodynamics work. You can make something cold, but it is only by removing heat from it, not by adding cold. That is the defining line, right? What do you do to change it? Therefore, we are not measuring cold, we are measuring heat. We're not measuring dark, we're measuring light. We're not measuring, Earth is going to be hard, but volatile and fixed even. That's a measurement of the volatility, right? Not the fixity. We only use one end to define what is, but it is a spectrum that we are defining. I think that covers all of this, right? These opposites do exist. Our understanding of them may not ever be complete. Most of them are going to be relative. Often, the polarity is arranged as a quaternity, with the two opposites crossing one another, as for instance, the four elements or the four qualities, moist, dry, cold, warm, or the four directions and seasons. Footnote 2. The representation of the tetrameria in Stolicus de Stolzenberg, Viridarium chemicum, figure whatever. Most of these we'll probably wind up doing a study on most of the things that are going to be mentioned in these footnotes, simply because he spent an awful lot of time discerning what was actually useful, right? I do not expect to have the same result from the study of alchemy from Carl Jung as we got from Agrippa, for example. He actually did the work. Agrippa absolutely did not do the work. And so I am fully expecting to achieve better results from Mr. Jung's work than I am from anybody else, but I have not read through this. This is us doing this right now together, and so I might be disappointed. But most of the things that he is recommending in the footnotes, I'm going to try to at least look at if there is an English translation, because I do not speak Latin. But, all right. The four directions and seasons. Thus producing the cross as an emblem of the four elements and symbol of the sublunary physical world. Sublunary means under the moon. Footnote 3. Concilium Coniunctionis, Ars Chemica, page 79, In this stone are the 4 elements, and it is to be compared to the world and the composition of the world. For the Latin or Greek are the quotations marked with an asterisk, see appendix. Also, Michael Meyer, De Circulo Physico Quadretto. Nature, I say, when she turned about the golden circle by that movement, made its 4 qualities equal. That is to say, she squared that homogeneous simplicity, turning back on itself, or brought into an equilateral rectangle, in such a way that contraries are bound together by contraries, and enemies by enemies, as if with everlasting bonds, and they are held in mutual embrace. Petrus Bonus says, the elements are conjoined in the circle of true friendship. Bibliotheca Chemica 2. Okay, so there are the elements, right? And these are things that we can agree, right? They may be relative, but we can agree. There is fire, there is air, there is water, there is earth, and the only real differentiation is the amount of heat contained in them. We just discussed that, but they do exist. That is part of what we have here. There are things more solid than you. There are things more liquid than you, and there are definitely things more gaseous than you. Those things are relative. Now, I have my understanding of this, and my understanding of this is that the primal element is going to be either air or fire, right? Probably air on further consideration. I used to say fire, but the reason for that is this. I mean, before the beginning there was God, and God was infinite and without form, the void, so to speak. And then God decided to become, and by becoming, limited himself from the infinite into the finite, becoming the point of creation. Limiting himself, he became the Spirit. That is the name that I apply. You don't have to use that, but that is the name that I use for the limited, finite understanding of God. But that understanding is literally every single element in existence, anywheres, ever, right? That moment of creation, limiting from the infinite into the now, was the transfer of the Spirit, and that is the beginning. The beginning is a snapshot, taking in complete stasis, and it is all of the elements existent, but none of them yet combining. There are no molecules combining into compounds at all. It is all of the elements existing freely. And then that would be air, right? That is why now I consider air to be the primary element. That would be the Spirit manifested. Air, the thing around you right now. And then there is the application of heat. And the heat came from God saying, I am the light. And the light was and became. That would be the infinite point. The penetrative energy becoming and going into the void. That application where he became and said, I am the light, and he became the light, and the light was good. That moment is logos, right? The setting forth of the Spirit into motion and creating things, changing the now into the next. That is heat, but that is heat applied, so it's going to be fire, right? It is the transition from oxygen and hydrogen free floating around into water involves the transference of heat. And so compounds are created from heat. Without heat, the air does not become liquid. And if it can become liquid, it also cannot become solid. And so without the application of the heat, the air cannot become solid. So it goes air, then heat. And then from there, it starts to condense, maybe removing heat. It starts to condense into a liquid. That would be the third form. And then finally, the completion would be the earth, right? The most solidity, the most removal of the heat would be solidity. And so for me, these 4 things do exist. The Spirit is the 5th element, right? I don't know if we're going to get into that or not, but the 5th element is the will, the desire, right? That was God speaking, right? Not the change and the becoming, but the decision to. Right? Going from infinite into finite was a decision. That is the will. You deciding to wiggle your fingers, that is the will. You are not making your fingers wiggle. That is the Spirit enacting your will. That is how manifestation happens. The Spirit enacting your will because you initiate the process by your desires. Most of the time by speaking them aloud. I think that's going to cover everything we need for the elements. The fourfold physis, the cross, also appears in the signs for Earth, Venus, Mercury, Saturn, and Jupiter. These are the appropriate symbols, right? The circle with the plus on the top is going to be Venus. No. Wait, that's going to be Earth. Venus is the opposite of that, right? So the Earth is the plus with the circle underneath. Venus is the plus with the circle on top. Mercury is the same symbol with horns. Saturn is like a little H in the wrong direction. And Jupiter looks kind of like a 4. I mean, we have done these symbols somewhere else. You are free. The link is provided down below. Always to the original source material. You are free if it is not clear in the video. All right. 2. Oh, wait. Let's hit this footnote. Footnote 4. All right. This is just quoting John D. from Mona's Hieroglyphia, Theatrical Chemical. 2. The opposites and their symbols are so common in the text that it is superfluous to cite evidence from the sources. On the other hand, in view of the ambiguity of the alchemist language, which is tamethis quam physique, as much ethical as physical, I do not know that can be emphasized enough. I do not know that this can be emphasized enough. As much ethical as physical. That is so vitally important, right? The chemistry, the alchemy is not just external. It is not just transmuting physical elements into anything. It is also internal. Part of the process is discerning what the actual gold is in the situation, sifting through the various measures that are available to you to determine what is good and what is not. That is based upon ethics, right? Now, kind of. It is more based upon morals, but most people do not understand the difference between ethics and morals. Ethics is what the crowd, the tribe, has decided is correct. Morals are what you have decided is correct. Those can be derived from the ethics, but morals are intrinsic personal things, and so it would be much more moral as physical. Would be a better way of saying it, because it is not dependent upon the ethics of the tribe, but instead upon the morals as you understand them. The tribe can tell you that it is perfectly fine to commit child sacrifice. That is not something that you should morally align with, right? And so there can definitely be a difference between what is good and what is ethical, because ethics are what the tribe has decided. Now, my tribe and your tribe are not necessarily the same tribe. I am a United States citizen. You may not be. If you are from Ethiopia, Afghanistan, your value system is going to be much different than mine. Our ethics are not going to be the same. My morals are surely not going to be the same as yours. My morals are derived from the ethics that I have seen in my decisions about those. Yours are the same thing, and so they don't have to coincide. Your decisions in alchemy should be based upon your morals. You should be exceedingly sure that you are erring on the side of humanity in general as opposed to yourself, and that is a very good way of making sure that you've got this correct. It is worthwhile to go rather more closely into the manner in which the texts treat of the opposites. Very often, the masculine-feminine opposition is personified as king and queen. In the Rosarium Philosophorium, also as the emperor and empress. Now, if you are unaware, I do tarot, right? I do tarot readings. I've been doing them for about a month and a half now. I spent a considerable amount of time investigating before I did that, and I do have a little bit of an understanding here. The Empress and the Emperor represent the divine feminine and masculine, right? The Empress is the feminine, the Emperor is the masculine, but they do not represent them fully developed, right? An Emperor doesn't necessarily have to have the best understanding. He can be born into that position and not have the correct understanding. They represent the decision to make the journey into authority, but not necessarily deserving that authority yet. They do represent the masculine and the feminine. That is true, right? The kings and queens of the various suits represent those as fully developed. The queen is the divinely inspired, fully developed feminine, and the king is the same in the masculine. And so this understanding is at least partially correct, right? Now, I personally am not going to use the emperor and empress as an example of the divine masculine fully developed, or the empress as it fully developed. They are symbols of prosperity. They are symbols of trying to attain authority and even receiving that authority, but not necessarily knowing what to do with it. All right. Also as emperor and empress, or as a service, slave, or verubus, red man, and mulier candida, white woman. Let's look at that footnote. Concilium Canuegi, Ars Chemica, page 69F, and Klingor Bukine, Artis Aurifie, 1, page 484. In the Kabbalah, the situation is reversed. Red denotes the female, white, the left side, the male. Well, there is an awful lot wrong with the Kabbalah. Right? We did a brief, right? We've been doing the podcast here on Saturdays noon. If you are unaware, we have been exploring for the last 5 weeks the Hebrew alphabet, leading into an understanding of the Kabbalah. The guy, Jason, who was leading us through this, does not claim to be a master. He has studied it, but not extensively, and so the understanding may not be complete. But it was well enough for me to understand that the Kabbalah really doesn't have an understanding. Their dipoles, the things that they hold as opposites, are not at all. They do not correspond well with an understanding that I have about things. There is a greater understanding and a lesser understanding, right? We are constantly searching for a greater understanding. We should never revert to a lesser understanding. There are things that are subjective, and there are things that are not. We do not live on a flat planet, right? You can believe that. I'm not here to disabuse you of your belief. You are wrong, right? If you are here, you're seeking knowledge, I am going to tell you that is not correct. But you can continue, right? I am not going to argue you down. You can do the experiments for yourself. You can find out for yourself. The understanding of the Kabbalah is at least incomplete. At a very minimum, incomplete. Not a full understanding at all. There are not enough variables, and they are not defined well at all in any way, shape, or form. They do not represent the fullness of temptation of man or the trials thereof. There is a brief understanding of a way to break down information so that you can refine the gold out of it, but it is an incomplete understanding. They operate off of a 5-point system. That is automatically not going to be correct. There are very few things in this world, especially dealing with the esoteric, that I am going to stand on emphatically. But there are a few, right? The fact that you need both the positive and the negative to perform good works is an imperative that I absolutely have to stand upon. If you are only using half, you are doing it wrong. It does not matter that you get results. You can get results from wrong action. They may even appear to be right. They will reveal themselves wrong later down the road. Another one of those things is going to be the location, size, and orientation, the color and frequency of the chakras. I cannot accept a lesser understanding of those. If you have an understanding where it is 5, that can be useful for you, but it is a lesser understanding. If you have an understanding where there are 9, that might work for you, but it is a lesser understanding. Neither one of those are inherently going to be correct. There are 8 chakras. This is firm. There are 7 internal chakras. They correspond exactly with the 7 colors of the rainbow. I do understand that there is a spectrum of colors and it contains a wide variety, but there are 7 true designations that we make along the way. There are blendings between each one of your chakras. Your heart and your gut do have an interplay. That is where your gut check comes from, right? But it is dependent upon your heart interacting. Your heart is the binder. It binds together the as below and the as above. It corresponds exactly with the frequency of light. It corresponds exactly with the frequency of sound. Not close, not near, but exactly. There is a reason for that. It is an intrinsic reason to the understanding. And if you don't have it, then you have the wrong understanding. You can still do things with the wrong understanding. And if you don't believe that, go look at Aleister Crowley. Go to the video, the introduction video, where he did have results. They just weren't good ones. They just were not effective. And even in the one particular instance where it was slightly good, it didn't last. He did things, they were wrong, and he still got results. Some of them even appeared to be good, but they were not. Having a lesser understanding is fine until you get the better understanding. And when you have the better understanding, you can't go back to the old one, right? There's a saying that I really love, right? You're not an asshole for walking past the trash on the ground until you notice the trash, right? Once you notice that there is trash on the ground, if you walk past the trash on the ground, then you're an asshole. Most people never notice the trash on the ground. They continue upon their way and they're just ignorant. They don't know any better. But if you do, and you see the trash and there's a trash can and you choose not to put the trash in the trash can, you're an asshole. You have a lesser understanding of what it is to be human, right? To be a steward for the earth. It is the same here. If there is a greater understanding, then we should go with the greater understanding. The greater understanding comes from the more correlations, not from a lesser, right? And so the correlation between the frequencies is important. It is not arbitrary. It is not something that I just threw in there to be different from other people. I don't really care about that. I care about giving the good information. There are things that we can disagree about. The destination of your soul, who knows, right? I have my assumption, you have your assumption, who knows? But the things in physical corporeality are verifiable. They are true things. The problem is that we have a lot of really terrible information, including the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah is based entirely upon a flawed understanding of reality in the very beginning. The entirety of the history, while it may be fabricated, is horrible. Like, it's not even just bad. It is a horrible understanding of how to act in humanity. That is a significant problem, and it is based upon that. That is a problem. And if that is confusing to you, I refer you to the Bible study. We're not going to get into those specifics right here today, but I have done an extensive amount of research into that. Alright, back. In the Visio Arisle, they appear as Gabricus or Thabritus and Baia, the king's son and daughter. Footnote 6. Enigmata ex vision Arisle. Art Arif 1, pages 146. Union of Sun and Moon. Petrus Bonus. Petrosia Margarita novella, the archetype of the heavenly marriage, plays a great role here. On a primitive level, this motif can be found in shamanism. Theomorphic symbols are equally common and are often found in the illustrations. I'm going to pop this word out. I don't know that one. Thought of as having the form of a beast. Used of a deity, having the form of a beast. Okay, so this is anthropomorphication to a beast, right? Instead of changing the god into a human, it is changing the god into an animal. Okay, that makes sense. Anthropomorphic, theomorphic. Gotcha. And are often found in illustrations. This is going to be footnote 7. The union of the sun and moon, Petrus Bonus, said Licinius. The archetype of the heavenly marriage plays a great role here. Wait, that was 6. We're on 7. The most complete collection of the illustrations that appeared in printed works is Stolzius de Stolzenberg's Viridarium Chemicum Figuris Cupro Incisus Adornatum. 1624. I would mention the eagle and toad, the eagle flying through the air and the toad crawling on the ground, which are the emblem of Avicenna and Michael Meyer. Let's check out that. This was well before any movies. Symbolo Ore Mensae, page 192. The eagle representing Luna, or Juno, Venus, Baia, who is fugitive and winged like the eagle, which flies up to the clouds and receives the rays of the sun in his eyes. The toad is the opposite of air, is a contrary element, namely earth, whereon alone it moves by slow steps and does not trust itself to another element. Oh, you man. Alright, that is not true. It's not. A toad is an amphibian. What is an amphibian? It is a creature which lives equally upon the land and the waters. Does not trust itself to another element, you say. Okay. Its head is very heavy and gazes at the earth. Now that is an understanding, right? That is not necessarily going to be correct. This is an allegory, and that is fine, but right, there are many other things that you could much better, right? That don't reside at least part-time. Now there are toads that live in the desert, I understand that, but and they are different from frogs, but regardless, right, there are better things that could have been this, right? If you're going to look at Earth, a mole would have been better, right? A rat would have been better. A toad. Its head is very heavy and gazes at the earth. Really? Really? That's what happens with a toad? They can't lift their head? Come on, come on, come on. For this reason, it denotes the philosophic earth, which cannot fly. Now that we don't have any flying toads that I'm aware of. An example cannot be sublimated, as it is firm and solid. Upon it as a foundation, the golden house is to be built. That is footnote 9, the treasure house. Gazo Fallacium Domus Theosauria, of philosophy, which is synonym for the Aureum Philosophium, or lapis. Now for me, the understanding of the lapis is going to be that it is not, well, maybe kind of synonymous with the philosopher's stone, and therefore it is going to be represented by the heart. Even though the coloration is not going to be right, the designation is. The idea goes back to Aufidius, see Concilium Coniogi, Ars Chemica, and ultimately to Zoismos, who describes the lapis as a shining white temple of marble. That is a different understanding for sure. Were it not for the earth, in our work, the air would fly away, neither would the fire have its nourishment nor the water its vessel. Footnote 10. Okay, that is just a reference to a different volume. 3. Another favorite theomorphic image is that of the two birds or two dragons, one of them winged, the other wingless. This allegory comes from an ancient text, De Chemica Signoris Antiquissimi Philosophiae Libellis. Footnote 11. And that is going to be, this printing is undated, but it probably comes from a Samuel Emmels press at Strasbourg and may be contemporaneous with Ars Chemica, which was printed there in 1566, and matches our Libellus as regards type, paper, and format. The author, Senior Zadith Filius Hamuel, may perhaps been one of the Heronites of the 10th century, or at least have been influenced by them. If the Clavis Maioris Sapienti, mentioned by Stapleton, Muhammad bin Umail, his date, writings, and place in alchemical history, is identical with the Latin treatise of the same name, traditionally ascribed to Artefius, this could be taken as proved, since that treatise contains a typical Heronite astral theory. Ruska, Studien, groups seniors with the Thurba literature that grew up on Egyptian soil. The wingless bird or dragon prevents the other from flying. They stand for Sol and Luna, that would be the sun and moon, brother and sister, who are united by means of the art. Footnote 12. Senior says, I joined the two luminaries in marriage, and it became as water, having two lights. Now, this for me is going to have a different understanding, right? Soul and lunar are representatives of something, right? But it is not necessarily the primal forces. It is a representative of light and dark. Light and dark are the two primal forces. The two primal forces are the void and the point of light. The thing that was and the thing that is making. The receptive and the receptive. Or the penetrative, right? That's what I meant. The positive and negative. The creation and destruction. The masculine and feminine. That is what is represented here. The white is going to be masculine. It is the penetrative. Black is going to be feminine. It is the absorptive. It is the part that takes into itself. That would be a woman, right? And so these things do stand for. The brother and sister designation can even be, right? They're not really having sex. It's not nasty. And so these are things that are absolutely intrinsic to the understanding. I do fully hold that, right? You have to use both sides of the source. That is what this is. This is not talking necessarily about the actual sun and the actual moon. It is talking about the light and dark processes. In Lamsprink's symbols, footnote 13, Museum Hermeticum, alright, it is just a reference to another thing, they appear to the astrological fishes, which, swimming in the opposite direction, symbolize the spirit-soul polarity. That, again, is going to be the light-dark creation, destruction, the same thing, spirit-soul polarity. Now, there is, the soul is, right? When God decided to create, he did. He created the entire universe, and then in order to experience the universe, he decided to create us. That is a much simplified thing, right? But the soul is God has decided to become you. You are not God. You are just merely a very tiny reflection thereof, but you are a small representative of the divine. The divine spirit or soul individualized into your existence for your existence. The spirit is the logos. It is the part that allows the creation. It is the part that changes the now into the next. When you take a breath, it distributes the oxygen to your fingertips. Whenever you eat food, it transfers that into fuel. It is the part that you do not control. Now, you can take a measure of control of it with intentionality and a lot of other things lining up correctly, but it is different than the soul. The soul is the part that resides inside of this temple. You are not the temple, you are the soul. The temple is the vessel by which you can navigate through 5D space. It is a car, right? You are the driver of the car. You tell it where to go, but you don't make the engine turn, right? You don't control the hydraulics that when you turn the wheel, the car goes that way. You turn the wheel, you make the decision to turn the wheel. When you turn the wheel, the car takes the signal of that and transfers it into hydraulic power and turns the wheels in the right direction. It is the same for your vessel. You are making the decisions for your vessel, but there is another thing that is actually making those decisions play out, and that is the spirit. When you make a decision, hey, I want to wiggle my fingers. You made that decision, and then the part that is you gives that to the spirit. How that happens is another video, but it is you making the decision creates reverberations which manifest into reality. That manifestation is the spirit. You make the decision and the spirit sends an electrical signal through your neural network to your fingertips, which then move. It is not you making them move, it is you deciding to move them, and the spirit following your desire. That is an important designation and another one of those things that I will absolutely stand upon. You can have another understanding, but to me that is always going to be a lesser understanding. If you don't understand that there is a separation between the spirit and soul, then you are not going to understand this book at all, and it is really easy to understand. The water they swim in is Mare Nostrum, RC, and is interpreted as the body. That I agree with, right? And so the two fishes symbolizing spirit and soul as polarity, two different things, is fine. The water that they spend in, our soul, our body, our temple, can be a sea. That is an equally applicable designation. Right? You have a vast ecosystem living inside of you. There are a variety of bacteria and viruses, both positive and negative, currently keeping you alive. Right? That can be viewed as they are swimming in the sea of you. Right? That is an easy designation to understand. The fishes are without bones and cortex. Right? These are the fishes of your spirit and soul. And that is footnote 15, which is Enigmata Philosophium 2. From them is produced a mare immensium, which is the aqua permanens, permanent water. Another symbol is the stag and unicorn meeting in the forest. Okay, let's look at footnote 16. See Psychology and Alchemy. I'm pretty sure that this is Jung's work, which we will probably get to at some point. The stag signifies the soul, the unicorn spirit, and the forest, the body. The next two pictures in Lamb Sprinks symbols show the lion and lioness. Footnote 17. They also appear in 11 Clavis of Basilius Valentinus, Chemical Schriften, page 68, and in Viridarium, figures 11, 25, and 32. Variants are lion and snake, lion and bird, lion and bear. Or the wolf and dog, the latter two fighting. That is symbolized also on the moon card in the tarot, right? The domestic side of man, the feral side of man. I don't know that that's necessarily a one-to-one to the spirit soul, but possibly, right? The conflict between the innate nature and the domestication, I guess, can be that. The latter two fighting. They symbolize soul and spirit. In figure 7, the opposites are symbolized by two birds in a wood, one fledged, the other unfledged. Whereas in the earlier pictures, the conflict seems to be between spirit and soul, the two birds signify the conflict between spirit and body. And in figure 8, the two birds fighting do in fact represent that conflict, as the caption shows. The opposition between spirit and soul is due to the latter having a very fine substance. It is more akin to the helical body, and is densior et crassior, denser and grosser than the spirit. I mean, the opposition between spirit and body, right, that would be degradation, that would be age, that would be putrefaction, the falling away, right? That is an intrinsic thing as well. The soul is eternal, the spirit is everlasting, but the body is here for a temporary respite. Right? It is only here to help you navigate through this experience. When you have your next experience, and I do believe that there is a next experience, it is not in the same corporeal body. It is in a different corporeal body because you have different needs for the experience in that particular situation. And so I have no problem with the conflict between spirit and body. Right? Immortality is and should be a goal that you do not strive for. 4. The elevation of the human figure to a king or a divinity, and on the other hand its representation as subhuman, theomorphic form, are indications of the trans-conscious character of the pairs of opposites. They do not belong to the ego personality, but are supraordinate to it. That is not subordinate, but above ordinate. The ego personality occupies an intermediate position, like the anima inter bona et malacita, soul, placed between good and evil. Alright, so The ego personality is the part that is making the decisions. It is the part that identifies with the experience, right? That is a facet of your soul. That is part of the reconstitution going through the experience. You have amnesia about the source. That is my understanding. That part we can argue about. Right? What happens after is definitely up for debate. Nobody has the full understanding of that. The soul being placed between good and evil is very apt. However, because it is literally the part that's making the decision between the upper and the lower. Now, the way that I have the chakras understood here, right? There are 7 internal chakras. There are 3 lower ones, 3 higher ones, and they are bound together by the heart. These represent body, spirit, soul, or body, soul, spirit, bound together by the heart. The as below trinity constitutes the body trinity. The as above trinity constitutes the spiritual trinity. There are many reasons for those designations, but they are bound together by you acting through your heart in generosity, right? The deciding point between the as below and the as above is your heart. The heart represents the soul or the spirit in this thing, right? The as above is the soul where you are making decisions and having thoughts. The as below is the corporeality, the very existence, the material side of things. And then the heart represents the binding between the two, the spirit enacting both the as below and the as above, the things you desire with the things you are creating, bound together in one unit, right? And so there is a trinity, and a trinity contained within you. That is body, spirit, soul in every designation. It is a trinity of the trinity contained within you, creating a trinity. That is the soul is the deciding point that decides between good and evil, right? The heart is the philosopher's stone that melds the two together, creating from the spiritual the corporeal, taking from the corporeal and creating spiritual. The binding together between the two. One of the reasons why I have to stand so hard upon the designations. And even upon the coloration, right? The light spectrum really does make a difference here. All right. The pairs of opposites constitute the phenomenology of the paradoxical self, man's totality. That is why their symbolism makes use of cosmic expressions like Coelum Terra, footnote 18, which is cf. Petrus Bonus, Pretosia Margarita Novella, Theatrical Chemical 5, pages 647f. Hermes, at the end of the world, heaven and earth must be joined together, which is the philosophical word, also mus herm, by Arthur White. The intensity of the conflict is expressed in symbols like fire and water, height and depth, life and death. We will look at all 3 of those right now. So that comes, the first one would be the fire and water, right? Fire and water is going to be from the manuscript Incipit Figurum Egyptorum Secretarium. The second one, height and depth, is going to come from, thus the height is hidden and the depth made manifest. And life and death comes from the oft-repeated saying, from the dead he makes the living, Milius Philosophia Reformata, and that is true, right? Nothing can be created or destroyed, merely transmuted in form from one to another. And when you are done with your temple, it will become a temple for something else. Maybe not immediately, but at some point. You will be devoured, right? Worms, or at least it used to be, we would get buried in the earth and the worms would eat us, making us part of the worms, who then shat out a part which became part of the earth, which then again gets absorbed by the plants and creates a whole new cycle. Right? From the dead comes the living is absolutely true. These understanding of the opposites, absolutely true as well, right? You can assign masculine and feminine to the various things. Those aren't necessarily good, right? Assigning masculine and feminine to the difference between lust and chastity, that's going to be arbitrary. I mean, do you say that women don't have sexual desire and therefore lust is masculine? Well, that's stupid. Women have sexual desire too. They are lustful. Maybe not in as excess as men, but they do have lust. They also practice chastity. There's no reason to give either a masculine or a feminine to that. Either one of them can be destructive. Neither one of them is in balance. And so while these dipoles are important, it is not important to designate them either as masculine or feminine. That is even bordering on foolishness. It is, however, empirical that you receive the balance between them, right? To balance your life is the goal. That is the point of alchemy. That is why this is in the middle of all of this, right? Is because it is the binder between the as above and the as below. The transmutation takes place in that. You are meant to find the balance between all of the virtues and the vices. There are 7 virtues, 7 vices. They are coins, just like these things are, right? Hot and cold is a coin. Lust and chastity is a coin. Love and wrath is a coin. Now, my understanding may be wrong definitionally, right? I have recently changed gluttony and denial from gluttony and temperance because I came to a better understanding of that particular designation, right? Temperance is the wrong word. That is a definitional problem, not a conceptual problem, right? There is still the problem of intrinsic inhumanity, the overconsumption of things, and the underconsumption of things. Not the sharing of sexual desires. That is a completely different desire, vice, right? The designation between gluttony and denial, as opposed to gluttony and temperance, was for definitional reasons, to reach greater clarity in the understanding of the concept that everybody faces the temptation to overconsume and underconsume. And temperance was the wrong way to say underconsume. Temperance is finding the median between, the happy balance. That wouldn't be underconsumption, and so definitionally I needed to change it, but the concept was the same. You have to strike the balance between all of these, and I put them here in this order for a reason, right? This on the bottom, this is your base. Let me go ahead and swap this around. We're done with that. All right, so here on the bottom, this is your base. It is red. It is love and anger. What do we symbolize love with? Is it the color red? Yes, it is, and it has been forever. Is it the color green? No, that would be jealousy. I wonder if that would be a function of greed. Yes, as a matter of fact, jealousy is a function of greed. It is wanting to hold on to something material. What is that something material? Somebody else, right? That's what that is. And so this is love and wrath. Love is the thing that binds us together. That would be the base. It is the thing that tears us apart. Also the base. The balance between those is going to be kindness, expressing the appropriate love, right? Next up is going to be the sexual desires, lust and chastity. As we have talked about, the balance is sacred union. Next up is going to be gluttony and temperance. Where does that go? To your stomach. Does that signified by yellow? What color is bile? What color is stomach acid? Okay, if you get sick, what color do you turn? Yellow? Possibly? Absolutely? Yes. And so the binder between this is going to be moderation, right? It could be temperance, but temperance really can be any of them. Moderation is consumption in the appropriate way. Next up is the heart. That is greed and charity. Greed is the love of the mortal. Charity is the love of the spiritual. You are to find the binder between, which is generosity. Next is your throat. When you communicate, that can be prideful or humble, either one. Generally, it is a function of one of the two. You are either speaking pridefully or humbly, right? The balance between that is going to be thankfulness. Next is going to be sloth and diligence, working towards your goals, or just doing recreation. There is a balance to be stricken, right? The balance between sloth and diligence is going to be patience, taking the correct action in the correct time. Then you have hope and despair, which is reliant upon the divine, right? Your hopes come from the divine. Your fears also come from the divine. The balance between those is going to be faith, knowing that it is going to play out according to the divine plan, even if it seems to be going wrong, not despairing because it's going wrong, not having hope when there is no real reason to, but instead having faith that it serves a purpose. These are not arbitrary designations. If at some point I find another contradiction, another intrinsic temptation of humanity, right? That's what these are, intrinsic temptations of humanity that you have to make the decision about as the soul to balance out in your life. If I find another one, I will add it. But I haven't. I have spent a considerable amount of time trying to. Most of the other things can be a understanding of this, like jealousy as a function of greed, right? That is the same. What color is jealousy, by the way? Is it green? Oh, what if you're greedy? What color is that? Oh, that's green too. Wow. I wonder if maybe that is significant. I bet that it is. As a matter of fact, I spell that it is. I enchant that it is. I create that it is. I understand that it is. But if there is a greater understanding, if you come to me and there is another virtue and vice pair that does not fall under one of these 7 designations, then we have to consider a greater understanding. But if you are functioning off of a system which falls into the understanding that is current, right? If you are looking at jealousy as a separate temptation, you are wrong. It is a function of another one, right? That is true for most of the things that most of the other systems use. Kabbalah definitely included. And that's where we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I thought we were going to get through 2 sections. There is a lot here to talk about. And so this may take a little bit longer, but that is fine. I am perfectly happy here in this particular spot. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment. Whether you agree or disagree with anything that was said, put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly. Or here recently, I have opened myself up for consultation, so you are free to consult with me for tarot, MBTI, spiritual guidance, or anything that we are talking about in any of these videos. The link will be provided down below through Enacting. It's the only thing that I have right now that allows me to do it. If I get better resources, we will have more options. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Fit State. Peace.